This is Monica Perez here today with our returning guest and friend of the show, Anthony Raimondo. Hi, Anthony. How are you doing?
I'm well, Monica. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I haven't seen you in a while. I haven't talked to you in a while. I'm up here in Altadena. It's like very yucky. And I was just not able to follow the news. And as I started to get back into it, some of this stuff that's going on it reminds me just like when Elon Musk violated SEC rules and he's still alive. Then he buys Twitter, like on Twitter, then he buys Twitter. He's totally allowed to keep running these public companies. I mean, in real life, this stuff doesn't happen. And now he's running around telling people to send emails to him that would probably violate their terms of employment and firing people without processes, and or so we're told. Another thing is that the this budget that the Republicans put forward isn't actually smaller at any future year than it is now. So what's going on? All these things and a million more things. I just feel like if you're a lawyer or working government or whatever, like it just doesn't smell right. Are you following this stuff? Do you have that same feeling? Like what's been on your radar lately, and what are your insights?
I don't know. I think I'm too cynical to have those feelings. I mean, this all looks like business as usual to me. I mean, I'm sorry. Did 2020 not convince you that we are not a nation of laws?
Oh, no,
we're not a nation of laws. No,
but if you get fired without the normal process for the wrong reason, you sue.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's address that. There's nothing other than media telling us that people are getting fired without the appropriate process. Number one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the only person I know just took early retirement voluntarily, which is most of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, a lot of things are being said that aren't true, number one. And number two, I'm just going to say what I've realized about myself over the last few years, because I spent a lot of my life not really thinking in very political terms, because I was building a business and I was raising little kids and, was trying to provide for my family and just thinking about kind of the day to day and focused on that stuff and the various conflicts I was in for clients and things like that. And I would say I started to try to figure out kind of who I was politically, probably because of the things that happened in 2020. And I've realized I don't really think I'm very ideological. Okay. I think I'm much more, for better or for worse, I look at things from, I think, a more in the moment kind of perspective, because I just don't find any use in doing anything else. I mean, so I look at this, and this is I'll reveal my own bias here. I don't care. There is nothing that can happen to state and federal bureaucrats. There is no injustice great enough that it wouldn't be deserved. If they get fired without cause, good.
They deserve
it. They're worthless. I'm dealing right now with a client in the state of Washington, where an administrative agency in the state of Washington, through a series of cases, is literally trying to put him out of business for no reason, no valid reason whatsoever. The first thing that he's in a very regulated business where you have to have a license, government license, to operate. You have to renew that license annually. So he applied for the renewal of his license, and they opened up, the enforcement division opened up an investigation, and then they said, we're not going to give you your license because you're under investigation, which is illegal. The government can't not give you a license unless they've actually given you due process and proved that you broke the law, and whatever they proved is the basis for them to argue that you're no longer entitled to have a license. So I got involved. I pushed back on this. They backed down. They gave him the license. They issued it retroactively. And then from that investigation, we've had a series of cases that are literally about nothing. There was a case about, he had some employee housing, and it was for workers who were in the state temporarily. So he put them in a motel. Well, their motel rooms were nice. They were clean. It was like a normal motel. But they didn't have kitchens in their room, and technically the employment regulations say the person has to have access to either a private kitchen or a common kitchen area. So it's a technical violation of law. They hit him with 4 serious OSHA violations.
Wow. I hate that one thing.
The standard for a serious violation is substantial probability of serious illness or death. And the investigator literally said because they were cooking on gas grills outside in the parking lot of this motel, that was a serious violation. Really? That's a substantial probability of serious illness or death? So we had to push back on that, and they backed down. And now he's facing a $1.25 million fine, okay, for allegedly not handing out a certain piece of paperwork to workers on hire. Everybody's wages were paid. There's no workplace safety violations. There's no actual harm done to anybody.
Right.
Now, we think they're wrong. We actually are not even guilty of what they accused us of. But my point is, I deal with these people every day. Every day, I deal with administrative agencies at the state and federal level. And the people who work for them are the most arrogant, entitled, horrible, awful, mediocre people who do nothing but destroy people's lives. So if Elon Musk and Donald Trump want to run roughshod through that system and abuse all of those people's rights and fire them all unjustly and without cause and without process, good. They deserve it because they've done exactly the same thing to others. Without standing up for them. So I don't care about them. I hope they suffer. And if we're going to throw out the law, which we've done in this country clearly since 2020, it's indisputable. We've abandoned everything about our system. So if we're going to throw stuff out about our system, I'm going to cheer when it hurts the people that deserve it.
My thought was that I find it hard to believe, not that I think it's not justified, but also as far as justifying it, they're firing people, but they're not reducing the budget. So
well, again, those two things, first of all, I operate off the assumption that they're going to increase the budget.
But I'm saying there's got to be what are they doing? They're firing the people, but they're
doing what they always do. They're stealing the money. That's what they always do. Okay. I mean, if you thought Trump and Elon Musk were going to do some fundamental structural change to our government that was going to make it operate differently, I don't know what you were looking at.
No, I absolutely didn't. I'm just saying, I definitely did not. I'm just saying, I'm finding it hard to believe from a legal perspective that what we're being told is really happening. I don't think these people are getting fired.
Well, I don't think it is happening.
Right. And not suing. And if they want to sue, Chuck Grassley put out this anti-injunction thing. So I've been reading these articles in the Wall Street Journal that Chuck Grassley wants to keep all federal courts from making a nationwide injunction so that only the Supreme Court can do it. And then there was an article yesterday that the Supreme Court is totally overwhelmed already with all of Trump's stuff. So it just seems to me there's a systematic thing. And I thought from a legal perspective, you could tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Let's back up for a minute, because I think we've got to take these topics kind of one by one. Okay. So is there hysteria in the federal bureaucracy? Absolutely. People are freaking out. The people that I deal with are freaking out. And I am seeing some real things. Like I have cases with federal agencies that have come to a dead halt. And these are agencies I deal with all the time. And if you don't deal with federal law enforcement agencies, you don't understand this. Like, they have specific case processing timelines that it's more important to them to get it done on the timeline than it is to get it done right.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are cases that are now way outside the timeline, and I've heard nothing, for months.
So what do you attribute that?
I attribute that to industries and entities that have influence in the federal government actually exercising that influence, which did not happen during the first Trump administration. Okay, so let me back up a little bit, because I've been a lawyer for a long time, and I deal with a lot of regulated industries, and I mentioned both state and federal agencies. So I've seen this change when administrations change. Okay. When Obama came in, they wielded executive power in terms of agency policy very, very aggressively. And the way these agencies interacted with us and the things that they do to our clients and the way the whole process worked changed dramatically. When Trump came in the first time, nothing changed. Nothing at all. Now, when we had Bush was fun, because with Bush, the federal agency guys, for like those of us, like I represent farmers. So I represent people in agriculture. Like the agricultural guys in the Department of Labor in the Bush administration were like our buddies. They'd like slap our clients on the wrist and then go out for a beer with us. Like, I mean, it was, we never worried about the feds during Bush. We were always worried about the state. Then when Obama came in, the feds became a huge problem. That continued through Trump.
Was that the Bundy era? Was the Bundy episode initiated under the Obama regime?
Yes.
I believe it was.
Yeah. So Obama was much, much more difficult. And that really continued. There was really no change in terms of dealing with the National Labor Relations Board, the U.S. Department of Labor, these types of agencies. Their agendas and their processes and the way that they did things changed not a whit under the first Trump administration. And I made a lot of enemies in agriculture because I yelled at a lot of the people from the big trade associations who have this influence. And I'm like, why aren't you guys putting a stop to this? Obama was on us the day after he became president. And, so why isn't the gas pedal being lifted off? Get the boot off our neck. They didn't. Okay. I think that's happening now. I don't really think hugely unusual things are happening. I think the media is getting hysterical.
But your agency is grinding to a halt.
Yeah, but that's just, honestly, I view that as the normal political swings. That's right, what should have happened.
I'm just wondering
when Trump became president the first time.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's a policy difference or a capacity difference.
I don't think we've had mass terminations of federal agents. I know for a fact we haven't had immigration raids in spite of everybody wanting to talk about immigration raids. We haven't had immigration raids.
Well, all they have to do is stop sending the buses to Ecuador.
Well,
we go and get those people. So all they have to do is stop getting them.
Honestly, and a lot of my conservative friends are very upset at me because I keep saying this. Trump is not serious about immigration unless and until you see workplace enforcement. When I start seeing I-9 audits against large growers in California and against large hotel chains and the labor contractors that they all use, then I'll believe they're serious about immigration. Because immigration is not about gang members. Illegal immigration is not about gang members or criminal aliens. Yeah, those people are there, but those people are like headline grabbers and attention grabbers. And you take a guy with a bunch of face tattoos and you send him to El Salvador and you say, you tell a housewife in Iowa that you solved the problem, and everyone goes, yay! Oh, look, Fox News isn't showing me, a bunch of caravans coming across the border anymore. I guess he sealed the border. Meanwhile, it's business as usual in industries that employ 90+% illegal aliens, and everyone knows it, and no one touches it, and no one does anything about it. So it's not serious. It's just theater, a lot of what's happening here. Okay. I'm enjoying seeing federal agencies squirm. I guess I would concern myself with the question if I thought that people were actually being fired. I'm disappointed that they're not being fired, frankly. I think Trump has a wonderful opportunity, and he's using the right rhetoric for it, to actually take control. If these are executive agencies, there's no such thing as an independent federal agency. It does not exist. These are all executive branch agencies.
Totally unconstitutional. They shouldn't exist in the first place. And I wish
if they do exist, they serve at the pleasure of the president. They should not have unions. There should be no public employee union. Unions should not be able to hold the taxpayer hostage through economic weaponry. The whole idea of collective bargaining is a capitalistic concept. Labor uses its economic weapons and its economic leverage against the employer's economic leverage, and the needle lands somewhere in the middle that approximates fairness. You don't have that when you're dealing with public agencies that aren't playing with their own money. But I digress. So I think a lot of this has to do with, and the more interesting part of it to me is, and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but I do think what Trump is doing is going to have an impact in how these branches relate to each other. And some of that you and I talked about previously in what the Supreme Court has been doing to limit the authority and scope of these administrative. Is that yours or mine?
It's me. I'm just mute.
Congress really has abdicated its authority to legislate to these agencies. And, we've got a government, and this is going to sort of lead into your next question about the courts and injunctions and things like that. Forgive me for being crass, but we're all fucked up in how our government branches interact with each other. For example, the idea that we're arguing about whether the president has plenary authority over executive branch agencies. My answer to that is those people aren't entitled to any process. They should be at-will employees that serve at the pleasure of the president, because those are executive branch agencies. And the president should feel free to do whatever he wants to do with those agencies because they're his. The courts, and this is the problem that we have. And this kind of goes back to our conversation we had about Marbury versus Madison. We are over-reliant on the courts as instruments of public policy. And that is not what the founders did not view the courts as the arbiters and the veto power over the actions of the political branches. And there used to be a time when the Supreme Court would say, we're not going to decide this issue. Even though we think there's something wrong here, we're not going to decide this issue because it's a political question. It's not a question for the courts. They don't do that anymore. So the idea that a single district court judge can issue, we're not talking about injunctions here, by the way. We're talking about temporary restraining orders. It's not hard to get a temporary restraining order, okay? They're easy to get. They're not appealable because they're just designed to be a holding point until they can have a hearing. But what these federal judges do is they issue the temporary restraining order and then they postpone the hearing on the actual injunction until way, way, way down the road. And they are thwarting the policy actions of the political elected branches of government by doing this. It's an absolute abuse of power by the courts. The idea that a single district court judge can issue a nationwide injunction on anything or a nationwide TRO on anything is insane. The fact that a TRO could be nationwide is insane. They're supposed to be incredibly limited.
Here's why I asked you, because you are a labor lawyer, basically, right? I mean, is that don't these federal workers or some of the people who are being affected by this have this? I mean, I understand they completely serve at the pleasure of the president. I understand that completely. I don't think that they should have unions, teachers, none of that. However, don't they have the normal protections that anyone would have? So like if I got fired for not doing something that I wasn't allowed to do, like sending Elon Musk an email about confidential things that I'm doing, or wouldn't I be able to sue?
No. In the private sector, unless you have a union or some other levels of protection, in the private sector, you're an at-will employee and you can be fired for a bad reason. You can't be fired because you're a woman. You can't be fired.
Well, it's the DEI stuff.
You can be fired for an arbitrary, terrible reason.
I know, but you would, except for the 35-year-old white guy, everybody else is going to pursue.
You know what? I'll tell you what.
If
that case came to me and I had a 60-year-old black woman who got fired for not responding to an email, and an employer said, hey, I gave this woman the directive to answer this email and she didn't do it and I want to fire her for not doing it, I'd say, go ahead. There's no discrimination, especially if you're doing it to other people who aren't within that protected class. So the presumption of legal rights is not as strong as you think it is. The greatest protection these federal employees have is through the civil service protections that are implemented legally and through their union contracts. And those are all going to depend upon how the government does it, and those are incredibly fact-sensitive inquiries, which without having those contracts and those rules in front of you and kind of a case-by-case examination of it, we don't really know how lawful or unlawful what they're doing it is. I don't think there's any issue with the president delegating to Elon Musk, tell people to send you an email. I mean, the amount of like, pearl clutching over someone sending you an email and saying, what are you doing? Why can't
it just seemed like that a minor employee seems to me that if you had a restriction on like confidential communications and somebody completely outside of the chain of command with an agency that isn't really in your reporting structure asked you.
Is he outside the chain of command? He's acting on the directions of the president of the United States.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, I would have to see the org chart of how that works. Cause yes,
there is no binding org chart here.
Okay.
I
just wonder how a low-level employee who is not expected to, it's kind of like the military. You're really not expected to be able to make, I just remember as a banker, they're like, don't make decisions on your own about revealing information. You have to go to your lawyer or me. And that's the way it goes.
There's no indication anybody's been asked to reveal anything that's confidential or protected, number one. Number two.
Well, what did you do last week? Might be.
Well, we don't know. First of all, we don't know what level of security clearance Musk even has. For all you know, he has a high level security clearance.
Okay.
I
I mean,
don't
I
know.
guess I don't know how like a 5,000 or 50,000 low level people. I'm not
But
because I
again,
think this is all complete bullshit. I think it's a
yeah, I
complete
mean,
stage show.
I don't think
But
it's
I'm
very
saying I
important.
read these articles in the Wall Street Journal that act like this
Right?
stuff is
They act like they.
real and people are freaking out. And I'm like, there's so much
I don't think it's
more.
real, but even if it is real, I don't think it's very important, and I don't think there's anything wrong with. I don't think there's anything wrong with. I mean, first of all, every president brings in non-appointed, like non-Senate approved outside advisors.
I know, but to directly, it just seems preposterous to me.
It's
It
no,
seems
it's
like a
no more.
silly story
But
that's
it
not
is.
happening.
I don't think it's happening. But even if it is happening, I don't care because I don't think it's very
Okay,
important.
well, I was asking your opinion from a legal
Right.
point of view.
But yeah, I
I
mean,
just feel like
think.
it seems
I don't. Think,
silly.
I don't think there's a legal. I don't think that if Elon Musk did send these emails or cause these emails to be sent that say, "What did you do last week?" I don't think there's any legal problem with that.
Right.
Because,
Okay.
by the way, if you're the employee and you're concerned about confidential information, you can answer that email by saying, "I worked on certain projects that I'm not at liberty to divulge
Yeah.
the
Yes.
details of
Right.
without specific authorization from my supervisor," and then you copy your
Right.
supervisor. Right?
Yeah.
You can still answer the email.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable.
Right? I mean, we do it as lawyers all the time when people ask us questions about things we can't answer. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question
Right.
because of
I just
attorney-client
assume
privilege.
these people are incredibly stupid. They're freaking out. They're not expected to be treated this way. And the whole thing, I'm not defending them. I would rather, what I really want to see is instead of creating Doge to actually eliminate every single administrative agency. Maybe not like overnight. I'm not sure you could actually just dismantle the FAA, like just fire everyone at the FAA tomorrow. We have the reliance on these structures that have replaced private structures over time. So I would like to see them winding these things down, and
But I think the
they're
chaos
not.
lends to that. I
But
think
I
no,
think they're doing this to make it look like they're shrinking government, and they absolutely aren't. And what I think they're actually doing is taking these same functions, automating them so they can centralize it so many fewer people are there to see what's really going on in the long run as they implement the
and that may be
technocracy.
and that may be true, but I also think there's a secondary effect to all of this is that creating all this chaos and putting all this attention on these federal agencies does to some degree show how useless they are and how much we don't need them. And like you say, I don't think there's any avenue where it's possible to simply shut these things down. I'm not sure there's an avenue where it's even possible to shrink the size of government given where we sit right now. Like some stuff has to get broken first. As you can see, like let's assume if we take Trump and Musk at their word, let's assume that their intention is to cut these agencies to save money. They're already finding out that the courts want to stop them from doing that. There's huge obstacles to changing the structure of this system. So a certain amount of chaos and a certain amount of breakage needs to happen. For example, I don't see how we fix the problem of our courts and our courts' abuse of power. And everyone freaks out about the term because it's become sort of a in vogue term in the media, but without most likely the executive branch forcing a constitutional crisis and saying, I don't have to listen to you. We are co-equal branches. You don't have authority over me. Right. The idea of a constitutional crisis is something that the founders saw as healthy, right? The founders would have seen it as healthy if Congress passes a law and the president says, I'm not implementing that because I think it's unconstitutional. And then Congress threatens to impeach him, and it creates huge turmoil in the government and maybe even triggers a constitutional convention to figure out how to address the issue. They saw government as being much more tumultuous than we do. Stability was not their goal in creating this system, which is why the fight over the power of judicial review was so significant, because people like Jefferson didn't believe that these branches of government can or should have authority over each other.
He was on the wrong side of that case. It boggles my mind.
But
What? That was so self-serving.
But we're still living with that today. I mean,
I know it's
granted,
awful.
and look, I'm as cynical as anybody about our election systems and democracy and all that sort of thing. However, within the system that we have, whether we like it or not, the president has more legitimacy than the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Some lifetime appointee, some cleric in a robe, is going to decide these issues fundamentally. Abortion is a great one. And I've got so many people get mad at me on both sides about abortion because my position on abortion has always been, I don't want 9 secular clerics who are appointed for life to decide when life begins. That's not that's not appropriate.
But it's an issue for the states. They should just not. Roe versus Wade was
It's a political issue, right? It's something that
well,
has to
it's
be
murder. It's a question of what constitutes murder. That is a police
right.
power.
And that's a political issue that has to be resolved through the messy political process, which, by the way, is how the whole world has dealt with the issue of abortion, other than the United States, is as a public policy issue to be debated in their legislatures, et cetera. And the solution that comes out of that is a solution that people on both sides are often unhappy with, but they live with. They don't have, bombings of abortion clinics and things.
I mean, I think we're headed to that. I think we're headed to a constitutional amendment.
We're headed
like
to something.
The one in California, which is basically unlimited anytime abortion on demand, which means that the government will pay for it.
Which is, if California wants that, then that's California's
But
business.
I think it's just that's a model law for I think that we're headed towards
I don't want to get sidetracked into abortion as much as I want to focus on the issue of the public policy power that we have vested in the courts because we're too lazy and we're too frightened to have those political confrontations, has harmed us in immeasurable ways, to the point where we now have a district court judge, which, let's be honest, district court judge is low level. Okay. So you have a district court judge who was appointed because he went to the right country club and had drinks with the right people, and then got this lifetime appointment that can't be taken away. And he goes to a particular party's fundraisers and hobnobs with those people in a particular party. And maybe his kid works in a nonprofit that's aligned with that particular party.
Yes.
And then he decides.
I know that guy.
And then he decides that he is going to thwart the actions of the executive branch, which is the closest thing we have to a nationally elected official. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Well, I would my position on that is that if you had a specific case where there were a bunch of firings and they were for a bad reason, like you're being asked to reveal something confidential, like not to the right person, something like that. And that guy says, hey, like, this is wrong. I want to defend my job. And if that judge rules in favor of that guy in that case, wouldn't his peers in the exact same job who've had the exact same thing be able to know each person has to do it individually?
That's literally the opposite of how the law works. Okay?
It has to be each individual. Every single one.
Yes. Ordinarily, the way that the basic foundation of our legal system is that the only people who are bound by the actions of a court in a lawsuit are the people whose names are on that lawsuit, because those are the people who have had notice and opportunity to be heard. Now, we have exceptions to that. One of the big exceptions, which is I think where you're headed, is class actions. Okay? But class actions require lots and lots and lots and lots of process. There are specific requirements for one person to represent the interests of people who are not in court. We have to look at, is that person an adequate representative?
Can it be the attorney general? When the attorney general brings a case like that, is that tantamount to a class action suit?
No, that's government enforcement. Government enforcement is different because government enforcement is actually not a class action. Government enforcement is the government acting for itself.
So I'm just wondering if you had a state attorney. Yeah, but you wouldn't in a federal case. Okay, go ahead.
But you wouldn't in an employment case. What grounds does an attorney general have to get involved in an employment case? And the reality is, by the way, in the private sector, people get mass fired all the time and sue over it. And until they get in, and by the way, it's exceedingly rare that wrongful termination would justify any type of restraining order or preliminary injunction. See, normally what happens in a wrongful termination case is, let's say you get fired. Someone says, Monica, we're firing you from your job because we don't like Catholics and we've heard you speaking out that you're Catholic. So we are firing you because you're Catholic. Clearly illegal, right? They can't fire you because of your religion. Clearly illegal.
You're right.
So you file a lawsuit and you say, hey, I have an email here that says they fired me because I'm Catholic. Even with that, the odds of you getting a restraining order that's going to order you to be put back into your job pending the outcome of that case is almost zero. Because the answer is pursue your case, and you have remedies for that. You can get back pay for the period you were out of work when you should have been working, but for the termination, you get an order to reinstate
the damages.
Right, you can get reinstatement to your job with restored seniority, and all that kind of stuff. But things like TROs and injunctions, think back to law school, think back to torts class, think back to civil procedure. In what chapter in civil procedure do injunctions and TROs fall? Extraordinary remedies. Extraordinary remedies.
Yes, right.
These are and these TROs that we are seeing now are not being used as legitimate remedies. They are being used as political tools.
Right. To foil a policy
take out the reasoning behind it or whatever the policy is at issue. The fact is, these are not legit. This is not real litigation. These are not legitimate.
Right. I agree with that. Yes.
And these injunctions, TROs and injunctions are not being issued based upon the rules of civil procedure and the law at issue. They are being issued to stop Trump politically, not for legal reasons, for political reasons. And so, again, that's the price we pay when we turn our courts into vehicles of public policy. Then they become political. That's
okay. So when Chuck Grassley proposes a bill called the Anti-Injunction Bill, where he says that circuit courts, district courts, whatever, can't issue nationwide injunctions, is that the correct remedy for this overreach, or is it not appeals? Doesn't that feel like it's bringing in this other branch to further encroach on the separation of powers?
I do think it would be appropriate. Depending on it depends on the language of the bill, but I do.
It's just regulating the judiciary.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it would be appropriate to amend the federal rules of civil procedure to make it clear that a district court cannot issue an injunction beyond the scope of its own. That's effective beyond.
Probably is clear though.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't researched it, but the thing about
I know it has to be clear.
The thing that has bothered me from the beginning is, how does a district court judge have jurisdiction outside of his own district, right?
So maybe that's the thing.
It's all the time where districts go in different directions, and then we have a conflict between the districts and then the courts of appeal. And sometimes the different circuit courts come into different positions.
But it's not going to affect other districts. Yeah,
but it doesn't affect. The law can be different in different federal districts.
Right.
So I mean, the question is, would you want that district court to be able to issue an injunction that is coextensive with only their own district, or coextensive with the entire appellate circuit that they're in? I don't know the answer to that, and I think there's probably.
I'm sure there's plenty of law.
It would be worthy of debate. Let me put it this way: if you wanted to regulate, I think it's given the way that they're abusing the power. I think let me back up. Given the way they're abusing the power, something has to be done. Now, my remedy would be: I think they should impeach every one of these federal judges.
That's fine.
A politically motivated injunction or TRO.
That's fine.
Just impeach them and then teach them a lesson. If they want to be in the political arena, that's how the political arena works, right?
Yeah.
Throw them right into that political arena and then let Congress and the Senate impeach them if they can. That's how I would deal with it. Because if Congress decides they want to regulate the injunction power, let's have a debate over why and how and what we're doing, rather than just what we're doing now, which is one side's going, MAGA Trump, and the other side's going, fuck Trump. And, like that, we're not having any conversation about this.
So I feel like there's no way that those types of orders from the lower courts haven't been adjudicated in the past. Like, no, you do not have the power to do this. Like, my guess is it's well established just in precedent.
I'm not so sure.
No? Really?
I'm not so sure because
they never tried it because they knew it was wrong.
It's relatively the politicization of the judiciary has become exaggerated. I would say over the last 15 years, maybe. I've certainly seen it in the course of my career. I think that especially the federal judiciary, 20 years ago, nobody even cared who was appointing federal district judges. Like, it just wasn't even news. And now you're hearing members of Congress fighting about, we need to make sure we pack the district courts, not the Supreme Court, the district courts. So the role that the judiciary plays in our politics has grown bigger over the years, and it causes the judiciary to become more politicized. And, we've never had a president like Trump that made people this crazy one way or the other. And so I actually would be surprised if there's that much case law that limits their jurisdiction, because I don't think they were trying to exceed it. I mean, there's a whole lot that's disturbing that's going on with these judges, because we're also seeing judges that really look like they should have recused themselves from cases, continuing on in cases. And by the way, we're also seeing what I believe is the federal judicial assignments being rigged to make sure that the right judges hear these cases.
Well, That's old.
There's one federal judge in the same
That's as
court
old as time.
who heard like 3 or 4 of Trump's cases in a row. Like, I've been in federal court, okay? Like, that's not how the rotation works.
I've been observing that since I started on the radio like 14 years ago.
So
I've always been like, I know that judge. Like, I've seen that judge before. You go and look at their cases, like it's unbelievable that the same judges do it. It's like a conflict of interest.
And I mean, look, this is something that's been a problem for a long time. I've had plenty of cases where I felt like the judge should have recused themselves and they didn't. So that's,
I mean, it's very clear in the section 1 of Article 3, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. That has been adjudicated to say that Congress has the right to, I think, abolish them and also to regulate them. Like Congress.
That's why the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure exists. And I mean, that's why it's statutory. Congress is the one that creates all that.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've also dealt with the rules, as you know. I mean, you went to law school. We've dealt with the procedural rules of the federal court more carefully than other types of litigation. Like, when they change those rules, they study them and they issue the comments that go with the rules to make sure that practitioners understand and that the courts have guidance as to why Congress is doing what they're doing and what they're doing it for and how that's supposed to go. I mean, it's not like other types of legislation in that regard, and that it tends to be a little more cautious and it tends to be a little more explained. But let me put it this way. I feel more, for lack of a better term, I feel more icky about the way judges are behaving right now.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
Than I do about the way that Trump
that's interesting to me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
Trump is accountable. Like, as much as people pretend otherwise, Trump is accountable. The only reason Trump's not in prison right now is because of the public support that he has, the regular folk MAGA people. It ain't the elites that kept him out of prison.
What did he do?
What?
Oh, you're saying they would have put him in prison, but he doesn't deserve to be in prison.
No, they would have put him in prison, though.
Yeah, no, he didn't do anything.
If he did not have that groundswell of popular
support,
he would be in prison right now.
See, I would say the opposite. The reason because I do think it's so rigged that there aren't even two sides, really, that they persecuted him so that he would have a groundswell of support.
Well, but whatever the kayfabe of the political system is, what is real about Trump is those people are real.
Yeah.
Spend any time in any place that is like deep MAGA, come up here and come to my town.
Oh, of course. Those people are real. Absolutely.
Those people are real, and what they feel about Trump is real.
Right, but he has credibility because of a few things, like his persecution, the assassination attempt, like that just really has an emotional impact.
No, because it was there before all of those things.
I know, but what really got the vote out, it really had a surge at the end.
But what Trump's the core of support for Trump is even bigger than that. The core of Trump's support is not something that anyone gave him. Like, he didn't take it and it wasn't manipulated. The reason why Trump is the man of the people is because the people made him the man of the people. They chose him for whatever reason, as flawed as he is.
Well, I know the reason. The reason is he was very confrontational with the people who most of us have felt have abused us since the 60s. So he would say Maxine Waters is ugly. And like, I don't even know what she looks like. She may or may not be, but like, that's the impression I get just from listening to him, that she's, and that makes people feel vindicated. Whereas with Ron Paul, he was trying to defend the Bill of Rights, and that's just not as emotional.
I don't think you give those people enough credit. I really don't. I don't think you give.
In the first term, we would ask people all the time on the radio, like, what do you like about Trump? And they would say, I like the way he talks tough to Democrats.
People don't always know how to articulate what it is they have. I've often described.
Try to take them as
I don't think word. Trump. I'm going to be honest with you. It's the most fascinating political.
But that's how he got the emotion.
I don't think Trump even understands it. How all this has happened. I don't understand. I don't think he understands it. I think I've often described Trump as he's like a guy who stumbled drunk into a theater and grabbed the curtain to hold himself up and accidentally pulled it down. Whereas Ron Paul, for all of his principle and for how wonderful the things he said was, what did he accomplish? Go ask 50 people on the street if they even know who he is. I mean, it's a movement that didn't really accomplish very much, whether you like it or not.
No, I know, but you were
And the Trump
saying
thing,
what?
there's a real, so there is a real, Trump has a real constituency. Okay. Here's the difference between the two sides. Trump does have a real constituency. There was no constituency for Kamala Harris. That's all manufactured. Trump has a real constituency.
It took 8 years for that, though.
That was
8 years of a lot of emotional manipulation. But I want to ask you.
But it was there. It was there early, and the point.
It was there early. I remember.
Trump is accountable to those people in a way that many politicians have not. And I think one of the most interesting things that we're about to see is on immigration. A couple days ago, a recording came out that kind of went a little bit viral of Trump talking in a cabinet meeting about what essentially is amnesty for illegal immigrants. Right, letting people who have been here working in agriculture and working in hotels legalize themselves. And I think that's because he does have those industries in his ear. Like, I know people, big people in agriculture who are connected to Trump. And I mean, this is something they've wanted from the Bush days, is that, they want another Reagan amnesty. Okay. And Trump is going to have a problem because he's going to want to give this amnesty. I mean, hotels, of course, he's in that business. And agriculture is putting huge pressure on him. But I don't think his core base wants it. And I think his core base will get angry if he does it. And I think he's trying to figure out how to navigate that. That's why they've had all the attention on criminal aliens. I think it's too simple to just say that Trump is like an inside player, which of course he is. I mean, Trump's a billionaire. He's an elite. He's connected to all.
He wasn't when he started.
He's connected.
He was not.
He's always been connected to elites and the mob and all kinds of people. I mean, he's in real estate.
What these guys
he's in real estate in Atlantic City, for God's sake. But
not just real estate, a casino, which he got a license for, which he was not qualified for, and his sister was a federal judge. I mean, this is serious.
I'm certainly not defending Trump. And I'm old enough, and you're old enough, that we've watched Trump since he was a young man. There is something here that is outside of Trump that is not controllable by these powers the way that they think it is, or the way that they want it is, or the way that we might want to believe
I disagree with you, but go ahead. I will just say I disagree, and I want to ask you a couple of questions about something.
There is a changing reality, not just in this country, but in the world, amongst the people, that I think these elites are trying to react to and respond to, and they're trying to preserve legitimacy, and they're trying to use Trump to preserve that legitimacy. And he's happy to do it, and he's happy to play that role. But Trump is a symptom of something much bigger that's going on in the world.
I think he was a redirection of the Ron Paul energy.
I don't think so at all.
I totally think so. I feel 100%.
The Ron Paul energy was already gone, man. The Ron Paul revolution was a mouse fart in a hurricane. It didn't do anything. It was already over.
That thing that you're talking about, that zeitgeist that's saying this is not right, was that was a vent for that, which was the Bill of Rights, and people weren't accepting that. That the establishment could not have that. People were beginning to get educated and understand. When you had college students lighting dollar bills on fire, coming to his rallies and mass, people were starting to remember what their grandparents taught them. And Trump took that zeitgeist. Like, Ron Paul won Iowa.
I think you're overstating the influence and effectiveness of what Ron Paul did. And I think
it's not Ron Paul. It's the fact that people were getting pissed, just like you said. And instead of allowing Ron Paul, they got Trump, who's ushering in the technocracy.
First of all, I don't think Ron Paul ever harnessed the kind of movement that Trump
No, he definitely didn't. And he wasn't allowed to.
I don't think he was capable of it.
I think he was.
He doesn't have the kind of charisma that's necessary.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They never would have let him do it. They let Trump do it, and now he's ushering in the technocracy. And he's by firing these people.
I think they're trying to use Trump to harness it, but I don't think that's possible. I don't really think that that's possible. I think Trump thinks that he can harness it, but I don't think that's possible either. I think Trump thinks that he's in control of it, but he's not. And I don't think the Trump phenomenon is in any way comparable to the Ron Paul phenomenon, in part because it's just a completely different demographic. It's a completely different group of people, and it's a completely different set of motivations.
It's disgruntled Republicans for sure. So
Well, it's people who were Republicans without knowing why they were Republicans.
This is something I wanted to talk about. What do you think about I sent you a few of these articles. I've read many of them, that with this private lawyer, Boris Epshteyn, who is a real piece of work, Trump is going to the law firms, and I don't know if he's threatening them or what he's doing, but one by one, the law firms are agreeing to what now amounts to, in total, $1 billion of pro bono work, a lot of it to do with anti-Semitism legislation.
That's all.
And what?
It's all nonsense. I don't believe any of it. I mean, they might do some symbolic pro bono work, but they're not doing hundreds of millions of dollars of pro bono work.
The reason I think that these agreements are put in place is simply, without any other purpose, to conflict out all of these big law firms from being able to represent people who are opposed to that legislation.
I don't think so at all.
Okay, what do you think's going on?
There's plenty of law firms that will represent those.
Okay, what do you think's going on?
You can't conflict out enough law firms.
Okay, what do you think is? Yeah, I just thought the big ones would be. It would be pretty. It could hurt.
They don't do that stuff anyway.
So what?
Let's talk about who these firms are. Okay.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Yeah.
You're talking about
Skadden Arps, Paul Weiss.
We're talking about firms that are so deeply enmeshed in government corruption.
Yes.
And so here's what happened. These firms are all deeply, deeply enmeshed in government corruption. And all these firms helped Trump's political adversaries to try to undermine him. Okay. They rolled the dice on that side of the line and they lost that game. Okay. At the risk of quoting our good friend Scott from History of Home.
I love the lizard.
This is real baseball shit. Okay. That's what this is. This is old school New York revenge, right? These people rolled the dice against him and they lost. So Trump comes back on them and he's taming them. He's making them work for him rather than work for his enemies. And I hate this because he should put every single one of these firms out of business. They should be denied they should be debarred from government contracts. They should be denied security clearances for every single partner. Like, these firms should be destroyed. These are corrupt institutions that are worth nothing.
Yeah, no,
By the way, I will point out, and I've been waiting.
It's bad. I agree, it's bad.
I've been waiting to bring this up because of all places, and this is embarrassing that I even have to admit this, I've been fighting with lawyers about this on LinkedIn of all places.
Wow, that's super traceable, Anthony. Like, they can see your keystrokes before you press enter on LinkedIn.
I do everything online under my own name. I don't care. I mean,
yeah. No, you don't care. That's good.
We're not going to do anything.
I like that about you. You do not care.
They're not going to do anything to me that they haven't already done. So
right, that's true. I mean, I have to say, although we disagree on the nature of Trump, apparently, you absolutely put your money where your mouth is. And there's no question in my mind you're 100% authentic.
And I know what it's like to have government agencies try to destroy everything that you've worked for because they did it to me for political reasons. So, but let me point out a couple things that I've been pointing out to other lawyers who are up in arms about how dare Trump attack these law firms, by the way, that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, yes. Billions altogether.
Okay.
They're offering $1 billion worth of work, supposedly.
Did you know that that John Eastman is still fighting disbarment? What was John Eastman's crime? John Eastman was a very distinguished California lawyer who his license was taken away because he did the outrageous thing of filing a lawsuit on Trump's behalf to challenge the 2020 election. They disbarred him.
Oh, this Boris Epshteyn is in trouble for that too, but he's a complete
They disbarred John Eastman for it. They tried to disbar Sidney Powell for it. They disbarred Rudy Giuliani for it. I actually followed this case that no one followed. You ever heard of Marla Brown in California? No. Marla Brown is a California lawyer who did something that I did that almost no lawyers do, which is fight the California bar to keep your license and actually win and be exonerated. Her crime, they tried to take her license away for a tweet. She sent a series of tweets expressing opposition to the vandalism and violence of the riots during the summer of Floyd in June 2020. And they tried to disbar her because of those tweets. The same judge that heard my case, that sat over my trial, sat over her trial and exonerated her on free speech grounds. Okay, so we have a lot of lawyers that are smaller than these guys who have been targeted politically and had their careers destroyed or attempted to be destroyed, including me. So if you think I'm going to cry for Skadden Arps because they played this game at the highest level and it blew up in their face because they never thought Trump was going to win and it was going to bite him in the ass, and now it bit him in the ass. So, right, like you took a shot at the king and you missed. What, you thought there were going to be no consequences?
A lot of those people, I think that there is a war, or there's highly likely a war, or even possibly a war in the Middle East coming. And a lot of these places, the universities, the law firms, they will put all of that Democrat Republican stuff aside to take the aggressive side, Trump side, Israel side in a Middle East war. And they are happy to participate in legislating both at the university level and at pro bono policy work, in making sure that under the guise of anti-Semitism, they prevent any objections to the war.
They are negotiating peace with the new regime in order to keep the gravy train going from all the various government work that they do, some of which is profiting from war, others of which is profiting from other government activities.
You don't think they care about Israel either way? Totally new on that subject?
Well, I mean, you can't say that anything in our government doesn't care about Israel either way.
No, I'm talking about Skadden and Harvard.
Right, but they're enmeshed in our government. So I'm not going to say they don't care. I don't think they have any values. Okay, I don't think they have any values. I don't think they have any values.
Israel to win.
The reason why they want Israel to win is because that's where their bread is buttered and that's where they make money.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
I'm sure, Scott's going to make fun of me for this because I'm going to bring him up again. I'm sure Scott would go back and research every one of their partners to find links back to Israel.
I was looking for Boris Epstein. He's pretty,
they're a lawyer. Okay, it's a big law firm. I guarantee you a substantial percentage of their partners are Jews, and a substantial percentage of those partners who are Jews support Israel, just because that's the demographic.
And they would love an excuse to write this legislation.
They don't need an excuse. What excuse do they need?
They would love an excuse to not take any cases against it. And that's what I think is going on with Harvard. Harvard does not need federal money.
No one pays attention to what these law firms do.
But what about Harvard? Okay, Harvard doesn't need federal money. They just want an excuse, in my opinion, to not to be able to censor speech on campus.
Probably. I mean, I have to be careful because I know you went there, because I have such a low opinion of Harvard.
I appreciate what they did for me, but I don't defend their policies, their politics.
I think we should seize their endowment, but that's just me.
I don't know how they got it, but I would certainly cut off their funding. I would cut off all federal education funding completely, and I wish Trump and Musk would do that.
Well, certainly, I don't understand why private institutions that are very wealthy. Of course, first of all, I don't understand why they get
wealthiest entity in the world.
They're incredibly wealthy, and I don't understand why they get public funding.
No, they shouldn't.
Why they're exempt from taxation? They should be paid.
It's
a business. It's a for-profit business. I mean, Harvard, Brown, Yale, all these schools, they're for-profit businesses. They should be taxed if any of us are taxed.
Yeah, I have a book up there by Renee Wormser about tax-exempt foundations. He worked with Norman Dodd and the House Un-American Activities Committee about whether tax-exempt foundations were un-American, and they found that they were, and yet they still operate tax exemption. I want to show you a clip that I was watching that had to do with these law firms. It looked very staged to me. And it looked like what Trump was doing here was to give the law firms that capitulated cover by saying, look, you can tell your people that you didn't want this to happen to you, and actually have a quote that basically asserts that. I want to show you first. I want to show the people this clip.
Next, sir, we have an executive order for your attention. We've taken action against a number of law firms that have participated either in the weaponization of government, the weaponization of the legal system for political ends, or have otherwise engaged in illegal or inappropriate activities. The law firm of Jenner and Block is one of these law firms. This is a law firm that, as you know, employed Andrew Weissman after he came off of the Mueller investigation. It's a law firm that's engaged in invidious racially and sexually discriminatory practices. It's also a law firm that has participated in the weaponization of the legal system against American principles and values. And we believe that the measures in this executive order will help correct that.
And Andrew Weissman is the main culprit?
He's certainly
with respect to this firm.
He is one of a number of reasons that we believe this executive order is warranted.
He's a bad guy.
I mean, doesn't that seem a little inauthentic?
Well, all those things are theater.
Okay, but what do you think is the point of that? What do you think was the point of that?
I think it's a very public dressing down of these people. It's part of them having to kneel and kiss the ring of the new man who's in charge if they want to be in that business. Okay. Their business is so enmeshed with government. Their choices are they make peace with Trump or they go out of business. They're not going to go out of business. They got to figure out a way to make peace with him.
I just don't see it that way. I think that this is all about censorship, and they're all in it together.
You know what happens normally when administrations change? These law firms are still there. Like Trump is a little bit of an anomaly in a lot of ways, but he's an anomaly on this too. These same law firms have been doing this through various Democratic and Republican presidents, and they don't need cover to support Israel. They don't need cover to be against anti-Semitism.
The universities do.
The universities do to some degree, because of their student bodies. But you really think those kids aren't going to go to Harvard if they think Harvard's supporting Israel?
No. I just think this political system that I think that the universities are the source of that kind of like Frankfurt School stuff, that liberal agenda stuff that is like deeply psychologically designed to transform society to collectivism. And they need to support this bullshit that they've been spewing for 60 years at the same time that they say, well, we're going to draw the line here. You're not, it's like they encourage you to run around naked, but total freedom. And they've got to crack down and have zero tolerance for anti-war speech. They are going to need some cover for that. And they're going to later say, we didn't realize the implications, but I'm here to tell you that anything foreseeable cannot be considered unintended.
This flares up every few years on university campuses. Every few years, we get a bunch of college students that start spouting anti-Israel rhetoric or anti-war rhetoric. Like, dude, they figured out in the 60s that they don't have to worry about student anti-war movements. That doesn't slow down the war machine at all.
Yeah, they like it. Yeah,
it's just noise. It doesn't matter. And all these kids are still all in on the brainwashing, on all the other social agendas and everything else. So what will happen is those kids may, be frustrated by the suppression of their anti-Israel protesting, but then they'll go out into the world and be good little citizens and, buy into the progressive agenda. I mean, look, I have one son who's a college graduate who went to a public university in Texas. My other son is, as you know, in a public university not far from where you live in Southern California. The difference in terms of philosophical indoctrination,
yes,
is insane. And I'm not trying to suggest that.
Well, he didn't go to UT, I'm sure of that, because there is no difference there. But some of the other places,
it's still progressive. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he went to a large public university in Texas. It's still liberal. It's still progressive. I went to his orientation as a freshman, and they were announcing their pronouns and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not conservative by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
but
you don't have to cut your genitals off as before the first day of class.
Compared to what I'm seeing at a public university in Los Angeles County from my younger one, wow! I mean, you guys got a scary bubble down there that these college kids are in.
Yeah.
Where, and it's interesting because my son is in a music program, and he had a class where they had to organize. He had to produce, he had to do a project. So the project he decided to do was in their group was they were going to produce a benefit concert. They were going to put together a concert for charity, and they decided that what they wanted to do was raise money for aid to Palestinians affected by the war in Gaza. They're like, I don't know, a few days before the show, their college president shut it down. You can't do that on campus.
Wow.
It was for a class. It was approved by the professor, but they were denied use of the on-campus venue for that. Now,
has everything of that nature been denied in the past, or was it purely? I mean,
I'm sure it's targeted.
Yeah.
I mean, it was particularly hot at that moment, the issue, and this is a school that has a large engineering program. So, employers like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and those folks employ a lot of people from the engineering department at the school. My son was very well aware of it. And I'm like, yeah, they're censoring you. That's what they're doing now.
Because they want the war.
They ended up moving off campus and having a very successful event, notwithstanding, which was good. But I mean, my point is, I don't really think the universities need very much cover to do what they want to do. I think they do what they want to do regardless. I mean,
I'm just saying it's so much easier for them to say we have to. We were strong armed. We were bullied. It's what they're doing with Trump. Yeah. They're preserving the two-party system by having him, who's considered outside the two-party system, implement the technocracy, and then they're going to say we didn't want him. Like, we're never Trumpers. Like, he was rogue. He was out of control. That's what they're going to say, and they're going to be able to wash their hands of it and carry on.
If anything, where I disagree with you is I think the theatrics are actually to shore up that base that I'm talking about and make sure they keep that populist energy behind him. I think they're deceiving those people.
Yeah, because the technocracy is not what those people think they're getting. They think they're getting smaller government and not hardened government, not opaque government.
And let's remember, Trump is basically a 90s Democrat. Trump doesn't want to do the things that his base wants to do. Trump doesn't want to do mass deportations. Trump doesn't want to do workplace enforcement. Trump doesn't want to, reshore American manufacturing. I don't think Trump wants to do any of those things.
No.
I don't think he cares about any of them.
Unless it's needed for the war. If it's autarky he's after, then there is something to that.
Well, again, it will only to serve those bigger interests. But, he's not interested in bringing thriving economies back to the Rust Belt. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about those people. He doesn't care about any of it. And you see this but I think a lot of the messaging that's out there is designed to convince themselves that this is what's happening. For example, like I mentioned to you, I talk to a lot of MAGA people, like what you would call like normie MAGA.
My mom,
right? Like, I mean, around here, I live in.
My mom loved Trump.
I live in a small rural community that I think the median income in our town is about $45,000 a year. Okay, so these are down to earth, regular folk around here, and there's a lot of Trump love around here. I talk to a lot of farmers in California because I still work down there. A lot of Trump love amongst those people. But a lot of what his people want are not what he wants. So they're doing all this stuff about criminal aliens and immigration raids and all this noise about immigration that doesn't, to me, look like very much substance at all. And I hear it from them because they argue. They're like, no, he closed the border, and I'm like,
tell me about it.
Fox is not showing you caravans hiking across the border, but you understand those were fake too.
Right.
That's not how illegal immigration doesn't work that way, where like giant crowds of people file across the border. Like they sneak across in trucks and tunnels. And I mean, it's a covert thing when they sneak across. They don't come across in mass like that. Now, did he shut down Biden's wholesale granting of asylum? Yeah, he stopped that. But that's a drop in the bucket of our illegal immigration problem is an illegal employment problem more than anything else.
Plus, all you have to do is asylum once in a while. Like you can have if there was a backlog, you know what I mean? Then when Newsom comes in, he can resume. That's the other thing. He's setting this up for a Newsom dictatorship.
Well,
Vance. What do you think about Vance?
I don't think Newsom will ever be president.
How about JD Vance? What do you think about that guy?
I think it's too early to predict who's going to rise in 2028. I think that Vance is very vulnerable. I just don't think Newsom has. Yeah. I just don't think Newsom.
Do you know anything about Vance's like kind of background or policies? He's a Peter Thiel guy. Like it's a little scary. Yeah. So what do you think of that?
I just can't even. I think 2028 is going to be the political landscape in 2028. I think is going to be unrecognizable from where we are now. I don't think I think it's so impossible to predict what is going to happen in 2028 that I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to what's going to happen.
Well, Joe, not a Fed, says it's going to be Vance versus AOC.
I'm skeptical of that. It's
I
easier.
don't think so
Not going to
either.
happen. It's
I think
easier
it's going to be two white guys.
It's easy. It's just. Let me put it this way. Think back to those old salad days of, say,
Any
April,
previous.
say April. Let's think back to April of 2016. Remember what the country was like in April of 2016? Now, if we were sitting here in April of 2016 talking about what was going to happen in the 2020 election, do you think we would have gotten any of it right? Would we have predicted COVID and mass mail-in ballots and all the stuff that happened? And I mean,
no, but the candidates you might have.
Oh, maybe.
I mean, you might have been able to guess Biden.
You might have guessed the candidates because they had already talked about Biden running. But would you have guessed that it would be the most the most debated about election and controversial election that we've seen, since Bush v. Gore? That the whole economy would be tanked and all the COVID things would happen. And I mean, I think we're in for a wild ride between now and 2028.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, Trump said there won't be you won't ever have to vote again. So it's quite possible we're in for a paradigm shift. And that Besant, the Treasury Secretary, I was reading about him. He was, I think, the number 2. I know that Jim, what's his face? Who's that guy, Jim? He was George Soros's partner. Well, anyway, Besant was the number 2 guy when Soros, and I always thought Soros got rich, front running the pound was an inside job so that he could go do his politics. They needed to fund him so he could go do politics. That's what they did with Thiel and Musk and all those guys, I think. So, but what he did actually prompted a major policy change in the Bank of England, and Besant was the change maker there, and now he is our Treasury Secretary. So I anticipate the possibility here of a financial or monetary paradigm shift, which people have been looking for. I mean, we have over $30 trillion worth of debt. That's going to go up by another, at least $10 trillion, $15 trillion, something like that over the next 10 years. And people talk about the possibility of a digital currency, whatever. So I think, yes, what's going to happen in 2028, it is possible that we will be living in, an overtly post-constitutional world, or, some other almost incomprehensible paradigm shift. It's possible.
I mean, I do believe that
Jim Rogers. Sorry.
I do believe that the reason why people like Musk and some of these technocrats have gotten so interested in Trump all of a sudden and changed their tune so quickly, right? We went from Bezos being, trumpeting the Democrats from the pages of the Washington Post to sitting with Trump's party at his inauguration, right? Yeah. Like, because I think that the real big elephant in the room is what a disaster this financial system is.
Yeah.
And how in peril it really is. And this is a financial system that serves those people very, very well.
But the next one will too. It's like the Cowboy Stadium effect. I went to Cowboy Stadium. It was falling apart. Looking around, I'm like, why don't they just paint this? And the reason was he wants a new one. He wants the people to demand a new one. And
right. But they want to have their hand on the steering wheel for that.
And I think they are, with this Besant and Trump and all these people coming together to distract us with these crazy headlines while they got the government take the money and use it to reshape. It's turnkey at this point, I think. They already knew what they were doing. They had 12 years to do it.
The whole reason for Trump's immigration policy is so they can do amnesty. That's the whole reason for it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
It's the only Nixon could go to China thing, right? Like they used Obama to destroy the anti-war left, right?
Yes.
The last amnesty that
Truther left too.
All of it. They discredit all of it with Obama, right? The Democratic Party and its left-wing people became the pro-war party after Obama, because only an African-American progressive could turn those people to be into pro-war.
Totally.
And so, right, it's like Reagan signed off on the amnesty in 86. Well, a Democrat couldn't do that. Trump can do it though. That's the whole reason
Yeah.
Trump is there. They need Trump to give them amnesty.
Yeah.
They need it.
Well, and I think he's very pro skilled immigration, which is the real threat to Americans. Americans who were born here, they need the unskilled immigration, and not to be, it sounds inhumane, but to stand on their shoulders so you can use your college degree and get out there while they take care of your house and kids, which I'm not in favor of. But that is how the MAGA people would be able to elevate their kids. Like my parents didn't go to college. I went to college. My kids, will go straight to grad
I
school.
don't know. I don't think that.
And
I
then-
don't think a lot of people are okay with the unskilled immigration either.
But no, I know they're not okay with the unskilled, but they should be. And they should not be okay with the skilled immigration, which is what's going to come in, push down the wages of the lower professional class, like the tech class. I mean, not that they're low, but just like as opposed to the like doctors and lawyers professional class, like that labor base was getting a lot of money. They want to push that down by bringing in people who got free education in their countries, and then you bring them in, and their children will be competing with your children for places in university. So what I see around here is Chinese people with white nannies, and that's I mean, not to make it racial, but that's the immigration profile that I've been anticipating for a long time. It's what Facebook has been lobbying for, putting money, I'm sure, that whole gang, because they want to push the wages down for the tech people. And I think focusing on the unskilled, like border crossers, is also a distraction.
Well, I think you have to focus on both, because the unskilled border crossers come across in mass. I mean, they're here in mass. And I mean, I can take you on a tour of the San Joaquin Valley. The San Joaquin Valley is a ghetto because of that immigration.
And what are they doing there? What's their job?
Mostly agricultural work.
And don't we need that?
Yes, but is that the only way to get it? We didn't have farming before we had illegal aliens.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm saying it's because the people who are born here don't want to do that work. Well, they do want to do the software work.
What's interesting is that people who were born here, we operate off this assumption that people who are born here don't want to do that work.
Yeah. No.
People who were born here did that work for hundreds of years.
Right. Yeah. I went to Australia once, and
all
the Uber drivers were Australian, like white Australians. And I was like, oh, wow, I guess you can do this stuff if you want to. They're electricians, they're plumbers. Yeah, you're right. It's actually a shame that we can't do it anymore.
The housekeepers where I live are all white. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Let's take the dairy industry as an example. Your typical milker in the dairy industry, I'll just do the math.
Oh, I want to talk about the dairy industry. Yes. Tell me everything you can.
Your typical milker in the dairy industry, I'm just going to pull my calculator up here to do a little math. So minimum wage in California right now is $16.50 an hour. Okay. If they work 40 hours a week, which they never do, they make $34,000 a year at $16.50 an hour. The reality is those guys usually are making somewhere $50,000, $60,000 a year. They usually get a free house with the utilities paid for on the ranch. So they have very few bills, and they make a nice living, and it's a stable living, and it's year-round work.
That's awesome.
And it's not that hard.
The price of dairy is or is not subsidized at the retail level? I can't remember.
The price of dairy is a government set price. There's a government set raw milk price, and then the processor pays that to the farmer, or a variation of that to the farmer. This is a vast oversimplification of a very complicated pricing system. And then the retailer, the wholesaler sells to the retailer, and I believe that's regulated as well.
But is this price point, $16.50 an hour with all those benefits, is that a market clearing price, or does it have to be, you know what I'm saying?
The problem with the whole milk pricing system is we go through periods of time where the cost of production is lower than the milk price, and so they lose money. But
higher.
The economics of the dairy
than the milk
are crazy. But from an employment standpoint, I find it hard to believe that you can't recruit people native born
Yeah.
Americans who are in poor towns where there's no jobs and nothing to do to say, hey, come and live on this farm. We'll give you a free house. We'll pay you
Yeah.
50 grand a year and you're going to have to milk cows.
And by the way, why do you need to
What?
have enough money to buy baskets full of cheap plastic Barbie dolls every Christmas? I'm not saying like I'm an anti-capitalist, people shouldn't have money. But I am saying there's nothing the reason that we have more wealth than we actually produce, it probably has more to do with the exchange rate and currency manipulation and monetary policy and debt. Yes, I would rather a libertarian society, and
People's
you can
failure to
immigration would
understand-
find its level.
people's failure to understand the economics of how agriculture works and how illegal labor works in agriculture drives me nuts. All these people are on payrolls, all of them. No one's working under the table for cash. They're all on payrolls because farmers can't hide. The people are right out there in the field, right? Like if you're producing, 60,000 pounds
Yes.
of cherry a day,
Yeah,
and you're not
nobody's running out the
reporting
kitchen
payroll,
door.
and you're not reporting any payroll, like that's going to get attention pretty quick. So
Yeah.
they're all making minimum wage. They're all making overtime. They're all on payrolls. They're working illegally. It exists for a variety of different reasons, and cost is only one of those reasons. Okay, there's some dirty secrets here. It's one of the reasons that the United Farm Workers died out, among other reasons, but some of them they're of their own creation. But Cesar Chavez, for example, was very anti-illegal immigration and actually protested to close the border because he understood that the constant flow of illegal alien workers undermined any kind of labor movement in agriculture and any kind of collective identity in agriculture, and they would never get the union off the ground as long as that was happening. Well, agriculture is still basically a non-union industry, and that's one of the reasons why. Agriculture could operate on the very same model that construction operates with unions, where you have hiring halls that send out workers and workers go where there's work. Like this contractor has this project, so they go work over there, right? You're a carpenter, you go to the hiring hall and they send you over to where this contractor needs a carpenter. You could do the same thing in agriculture. And, if there was an interest in managing the labor supply that's available, if you tighten down on the welfare state, you think people wouldn't go to the fields? Yes, they would. Yes, they absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree with all of that. I wasn't suggesting that we need the illegal immigration. I'm just saying that people who scream and yell about that are not paying attention to the fact that they're getting layered. They're getting layered down.
Yeah, I mean, there's the stuff that's going on in agricultural production. We could go on for a long time about. Like, I had a conversation with a client of mine the other day where we're talking about how, the California asparagus industry is basically gone because it's all moved to Mexico, and we're seeing that happen with things like berries and table grapes now. Are moving
Blueberries, the organic,
But you understand what those are? Those
Oregon.
are American companies moving their production abroad.
So why not just let the workers come here? You know what they just need to do is eliminate the minimum wage, because you could have teenagers do it. People who just want pin money. That was the whole point. But anyway, that's why you can't have a blueberry farm in Oregon, because they have a ridiculous minimum wage.
You can also penalize companies that move their production to Mexico.
Well, why would that's not.
If Driscoll Strawberries wants to build,
but then it gets so complicated. Don't do that.
Why? Why not?
Because it just gets so complicated to have to keep layering policies on top of each other to make up for a lack of fundamental liberty and competitiveness in the first place. Minimum wages is probably the bottom line of what the problem is, from the immigration to the labor to Driscoll moving.
It has a lot to do with it. It certainly has a lot to do with it. And I wouldn't argue that point, but you're not going to throw a switch and live in a free market world, and I'm not sure that we can live in that world.
No, I agree with you.
If we look at where we are now, right now, the irony is all the companies that move their stuff to Mexico are now getting undercut by the ones who moved to South America. Like, as they go south, they're undercutting each other.
Yeah, cool.
But it's hurting our farmers here. But the point is that, like, people do lots of unpleasant jobs and hard jobs and physical jobs.
Yeah.
Farming is not, farm work is not so excessively impossible that people won't do it, especially if, and these exist, there's a lot of upward mobility in those companies. So the idea that we are absolutely dependent upon illegal immigration for agriculture is
Oh,
just ridiculous.
that's
And
great to know.
we could transition to another way. I mean, we already, virtually almost all of the seasonal ag labor in Washington comes in under the H-2A program for a variety of reasons. They have trouble finding labor domestically. So most of that labor is H-2A labor, and then some of it is migratory labor that comes up from California. But most of it's H-2A labor. Hawaii is 100% H-2A labor because they don't really have any source of labor.
And this is like migrant workers, temporary
They're guest
visas?
worker visas. They're guest worker visas.
Got
So
it.
you see some of it in California. Now, the problem with that system is it's incredibly bureaucratic and burdensome, and it's expensive because you have to provide housing, you have to provide transit, you have to provide meals, and you have to pay a higher wage for those people. You have to pay a rate that's called the adverse effect wage rate, which is based upon the fiction that you shouldn't be able to save money by using foreign workers.
Right.
Right,
This drives down wages.
You should be able to pay less for domestic workers to protect American labor. The problem is the domestic labor that we're talking about is all illegal aliens. Right? So if we're talking about tomato
Right.
I'm trying to remember the number. I think the adverse effect wage rate last year was something like $19.80 an hour or something like that. So you got to pay $19.80 an hour to that guest worker, but you can pay $16.50 an hour to the domestic worker. Right? So you actually save money by hiring domestically. But the perversion of it is that our domestic workers are not Americans. They're illegal aliens.
That's very funny. And also, however you got that 1980, that is not an independent variable. It's it moves as you know what I mean? It's
a government set
has
number.
A feedback loop, but it definitely is reflecting a feedback loop.
Right. But it used to make me crazy when they're like, well, we don't want to give the foreign labor an advantage over domestic labor. Like, wait, you don't want to give the legal labor an advantage over the illegal labor. I mean, it's, but the thing is, these guys who do this H-2A work, they live upper middle class lives in Mexico. Like, I've got a client, they have the same people that come every year. They harvest tomatoes. These guys come for the tomato season, and they make more money here in the tomato season than they can make in 2 years in Mexico.
So I wanted to ask you, though, can you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing in ag right now, or can you not?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. So I've been involved in the California dairy industry for a very long time. And about a year ago, I was retained in a very, very messy case. So there's a national park in Northern California called the Point Reyes National Seashore. It's part of the national park system in West Marin County, near the San Francisco Bay Area. And the Point Reyes National Seashore is a very unique national park. About 70 years ago or so, there were the community out there was established by ranching families that came out here 100 to 150 years ago and started dairy and cattle farming operations out on this beautiful peninsula on the coast, on the Northern California coast. About 70 years ago, these families made an agreement with the federal government to sell their ranches to the federal government in exchange for the right to continue ranching there, and the federal government would preserve the land as a national park. It was a very unique setup for a national park where you had working ranches within its borders, leasing the ground from the federal government. So this went on for a long time, and then as our modern era embarked, they started having more and more trouble with government regulation, environmental activism, a variety of different things. There was a lawsuit in 2016 that challenged the park's land use plan, essentially trying to force dairy farms and cattle ranches out of the national park. That lawsuit concluded with the closure of an oyster company that was operating in the bay there doing oyster farming, and no real resolution as to the ranches. So you fast forward ahead. In 2021, the federal government, the National Park Service, issued what's called a record of decision, which is essentially their management plan for the national park. And the plan acknowledged the value that the ranches brought to the park and authorized continued leasing of lands for ranching purposes. And a lawsuit was filed by an environmental group challenging the continued operation of ranches within the park under environmental law.
It sounds a little vaguely Bundy-like.
Kind of. It's one of these nonprofit environmental groups, and they ultimately, and in particular targeting the dairy farms, claiming that the park had not adequately considered the negative environmental impact and the need to preserve the elk that live out there. My clients are dairy farming families that have been out there for a century or so. I got involved. The case had been going on for a while, and they were involved in a confidential mediation to try to negotiate a settlement of the case. And the attorney who was representing these families retired. And because because I'm somewhat known in the dairy industry, the families reached out to me and hired me to negotiate the deal for them and then, see it through to its conclusion. So I spent, over a year working on that, trying to negotiate the deal. And the deal was announced this January, just before President Trump was inaugurated. Settlement of the lawsuit, I can tell you the part that's public.
Yeah.
The settlement of the lawsuit involved the Park Service issuing a new record of decision that would not allow for dairy farming, but would allow for limited, like cattle grazing for some of the livestock operations. A number of the ranchers, including all of the dairy farms, accepted financial buyouts of their lease interests, which were funded by the Nature Conservancy, which is a large nonprofit that they buy agricultural land to preserve it for.
Is it like a UN front? Do they make it all heritage sites that we'll never get back?
It's a mixed bag. I mean, I will be candid, and I've told this to them. They work with us very well in this case, so I don't want to smash them.
Yeah.
But,
Okay, good.
I mean, I've told them to their face that, I sort of generally object to what they do because I view it as taking farmland out of the hands of farming families.
And maybe even American land out of, I think some of those things like push it up into a kind of world.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it all plays out.
Yeah,
I don't know
that's fine. Yeah. No, I agree. I don't like next level.
What I do is close to the ground with small farmers. These are like next level financial wheelers and dealers that the kind of donors they have are the people that give like tens of millions of dollars at fancy parties. Like, it's not my world, so I don't want to speculate about it. But at any rate, essentially what happened is my clients were looking at the overall climate for the dairy industry in California, and in particular where they were. And the dairy industry, I would say mostly over the last 15 years, has probably shrunk by about half in California. I've been in the industry about 25 years. And there was a time when it was very prosperous. Around like 2006, 2007, California surpassed Wisconsin as the #1 cheese producer in the nation, which since reversed itself again in Wisconsin.
Wow.
Wisconsin's now back on top by a comfortable margin. But dairy was a big industry in California. And like I said, when I got involved in it, there was probably, 2,000 to 2,500 dairies in the state. Now there's maybe 1,000. And it's an industry that's almost entirely family farms. And it's a very unique industry if you've never spent any time around it. So it's been beleaguered all around the state because of regulatory pressures, predatory lawsuits, a variety of different things that have made it more and more difficult for them to survive. Those challenges are all magnified in a national park. I mean, my clients have had their ranches invaded by like activists who stormed their ranches to object to being a dairy farm.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
This is what I think about the mink people. So you just want these animals. You'd be happier if they just did not exist. I guess they don't want cows to exist.
Yeah. I guess we're just supposed to kill all the cows.
And the minks. I mean, do you think there are more minks now than there were in 1980? I don't think so.
So at any rate, I mean, these people are passionately anti-animal agriculture of any type. So at any rate, my clients made what was a very difficult decision, looking at their overall situation and what their future was. And, these different families have different goals. Like some of them, you have to understand what I've seen in the dairy industry over the last 15 years. And everyone in the industry has these stories of people who were in this industry for generations and sold out just to pay off the bank and left with nothing. And these people, some of them saw a way to make a dignified exit and retire. Some of them want to go on and continue in farming somewhere else. And this money is going to enable them to do that. But the long and the short of it is, for a variety of different reasons, they decided to accept these buyouts. And as their piece of the settlement of the case, they agreed to wind down their ranches and accept money from the Nature Conservancy in exchange for selling those lease rights. When the deal was announced and became public, this triggered a lot of controversy. There are groups in the community that are upset about how people who live on these ranches, there's employees and there's people that, like there's houses out there where like some of the ranchers have let people from the community live there. So there are people living out there. And there's a lot of people who are upset about the ranches closing, and they're upset about how this is going to affect people who are living out there. Relocation benefits have been made available through this process for those people. I mean, people are going to get a pretty substantial payout if they're living out there to help them relocate. So people are trying to minimize, we have all tried to minimize the impact on those folks, but there's a lot of anger about the deal because people feel like these farms, at least some parts of the community, feel like these farms have been forced out.
Yeah.
And there are accusations of collusion between the Park Service and the Nature Conservancy that supposedly like they rigged this whole thing to give the farmers no viable alternative but to accept the buyouts. That's really not the way that my clients see it. I mean, they view this as they made this decision for a variety of different reasons. And, they'd rather have an environment where family farms could thrive, and they wouldn't have been tempted to even make this decision. But
Right.
That's not the world.
You have to do what's right for you. I mean, there are 10,000 houses like across the street from me that are leveled. It's just complete rubble. And the people, one house on every block survived, and they have these signs that say Altadena not for sale. And I'm thinking Altadena is definitely for sale. And people have to do what's right for them. You can't, I always say like libertarians live by the sword, but they don't die by it. You cannot sacrifice your life for and not change that when you're not going to change the system. But I have a question for you about the dairy industry. Does this impact? So is there an overabundance of dairy farms? Like you said, that farms, there are many fewer farms, but it could just be that they just got super big or super productive. I'm wondering if if this is part of an attempt to get us away from animal products generally, or do we have just such an overabundance of dairy? This doesn't make an impact on the national dairy supply.
I think they definitely would like us to be consuming less dairy products, right? I mean, the whole history of the dairy economy is very complicated because, there have been times of massive overproduction. The famous blocks of government cheese that they gave out was because of overproduction in dairy. And that's one of the reasons why the milk price is regulated by the government and set by the government, because dairy was viewed as a staple. But in order to create like stable production and because you can't change dairy production quickly, right? Like, let's say let's say the milk price falls off, right? Well, you only have two choices there. You either ride it out and you try to make it up when the price comes back up, or you start killing cows to reduce production, right? You can't just like turn off the switch and stop producing milk. The only way to stop producing milk is to kill the cows. So, you either have less cows or you stay the same and you ride it out. So I think the idea was to create some stability. The problem has been there's been so much in terms of agendas that attack this industry and so little understanding of the industry. I mean, the environmental agenda is an obvious one, and it's one they're particularly vulnerable to in the national park. The animal rights activist people are very aggressive, and they tend to like storm onto ranches and literally trespass.
But I don't even think the environmentalists or the animal rights people really have the environment or the animals' best interest at heart, and their actions and policies, I don't think they're overly manipulative and curate too much and take too much power. And then you have things like they've some of their like forest preservation stuff creates conditions for wildfire. What they're doing here with water, it's a lot of animals died in this fire. So I don't even want to give them the credit of.
My greatest fear for the people of Point Reyes is that once these ranches are gone, they're going to have wildfire problems out there.
Oh, of course.
The grass grows like crazy out there, and the cows are eating it.
100%, because that is the answer to our problems as goats. Now, I'm like, I don't know if you guys have. Like 2 nights ago, there were just coyotes all over the backyards of because all the fences burned down. We paid to put up temporary fences, but there were coyotes everywhere. The mountains are north of me. And the coyotes and the bears and everything, they don't usually come down here. They're everywhere. And I just think you put goats up there, you're going to have no goats and a lot more coyotes. So it doesn't always work. But a cow, I think a cow on a beach is the answer to that, is to answer the wildfires there.
And these, if you've ever, I don't know if you've ever been up there, but if you ever go up to Point Reyes, the
I
peninsula,
already just texted my husband saying, like, we have to go to this place. It's beautiful.
It's incredibly beautiful, and it's like green, grassy hillsides in the springtime, but all that grass dries out in the summertime and turns brown. And so right now, there are cows grazing out there because it's been wet and the grass is really thick. Well, is there going to be enough cattle grazing out there to eat down all this grass in future years and prevent wildfire risk? Who knows? The point is that it's a sad situation because it really is a neat little community. I mean, it's hard to even describe what this community is like that formed out there, 100 years ago. And a lot of these people were either immigrant families or people who came west and gambled everything on trying to carve out a life in this, what is often it's a very remote, and in the wintertime, it's a very hostile place. But there's a lot of other forces kind of swirling around it. And then the latest thing is apparently I found out on Friday that a congressional committee, if you give me a minute, I can figure out which committee it is.
Yep.
A congressional committee is investigating the deal. And they are demanding from both the Nature Conservancy and from the environmental plaintiffs in the case information about the deal. I guess presumably for some type of congressional hearing, committee hearings, investigative hearings they're going to have, and they're demanding that the CEO of the Nature Conservancy appear there. So my clients are talking about what kind of statement they want to make in connection with this. The Nature Conservancy in the press has sort of been made out to be the villain in this scenario, but that's not really fair. Again, I have my issues overall with kind of some of the things they do, but in this situation, they're not the bad guy. They brought money to the table that gave these families the option to decide whether or not they wanted to take it, which, was an option that wasn't there before. The real enemy here, the real villain here is a state and federal regulatory environment that makes it impossible for small farms to survive. What has happened over the last 15 years with the reduction in the size of farms is only the ones that consolidate and get bigger survive, and the little ones can't make it. And the industry, they just fought off an environmental initiative in Sonoma County, which is the next county over, that literally, had it passed, would have put every small dairy, it would have imposed an environmental requirement that would have put every small dairy out of business in the county.
That's true in many industries. I have to say, it's called regulatory externalities or regulatory economies of scale. If you have to have an accounting department, a legal department, an OSHA compliance department, HR, then small businesses that would have been fine on their own just cannot support the overhead of that. And then you have consolidation in industry. And that's why you have these much, much bigger companies. So I totally recognize what you're saying. And I would say it's the rule rather than the exception in one form or another.
So it's the House Committee on Natural Resources. So I've been following this story for the last few days. And one of the things that's come out is Jared Huffman, who's a Democratic congressman who it's his district where all this is happening.
Interesting.
He's the ranking Democrat on that committee, and he's been in the media the last couple of days all bent out of shape because I guess his Republican colleagues didn't tell him that they were going to do this and have this investigation. And he's been denouncing them and defending the deal and things like that, which is fine. We want this deal to go through. But I can tell you a funny story about him because this isn't confidential.
Yeah.
I don't usually get involved in these sort of things. It's much higher level than I'm used to. When we were in the middle of these negotiations, we got stalled out over a disagreement on the terms of these agreements. And he actually called. He wasn't involved in the negotiations. I don't know who tipped him off. Somebody asked him to talk to me, but he called me on my cell phone on a Saturday morning. Congressman. Wow. And he was putting pressure on me basically to concede to get the deal done to some terms that I felt weren't very good for my clients. And I argued with him about that. And he told me that he said that he thought I was the biggest asshole he'd ever spoken to. And
Were
I
you
said,
highly complimented?
yes, I said, I'll take that as a compliment given that you're a
Yes,
politician.
absolutely. That's
Uh,
excellent. Good for you.
well,
Because
he's
they're used to people kissing their asses. It
yes,
pisses me
no one ever
off.
talked to him. I don't think anyone talked to him the way that I talked to him because I don't care about this guy. And his history is he was an attorney for the National Resources Defense Council. Okay, so the first thing he does when he gets on the phone with me is try to tell me all the wonderful things he's done for ranchers over the years. And I'm like, literally, you're the enemy of these people.
See, you're a guy who fought to save your license against persecution like this, both in California and Oregon, or just
No,
California?
it's California.
But I mean, so they know that you'll put up a fight because that I think that's 99% of where their intimidation value gets. But you will have to, I have to kiss the asses of these people who are not inspecting, but like permitting my freaking little pool. I mean, kiss their asses up and down. It's laughable. I can almost not do it without laughing. And so they're not used to that guy is not used to people pushing back on him.
Well, there's some congressman. He's used to everybody, but I mean, I'm so far on the outside of that kind of stuff. Like those kind of people are never going to be my ally. What am I going to do with that guy? Like, how does that help me? Like, and I've been there where, when my back was to the wall and they were going after my license, it was dairy farmers and people like that who testified for me at my trial and vouched for my character. So those are the people that I answer to, I don't care what some congressman thinks of me. And the reality was I was hired to get this deal done and I was going to get it done on the terms that I felt were best for the clients. And there was nothing this guy was going to say that was going to change that. But they're used to being more influential than that. And it was just kind of a funny moment because I don't think I've ever I'm trying to think if I've ever talked directly to a congressman before. I don't think I have.
Yeah.
I may have, but certainly not for that long. And
I mean, there's like in Congress, they'll frog march you out of there if you don't say like, thank you, sir. I have another, basically. They are really ridiculous.
I was quite amused when he was giving me his litany about how much he has, held the line for farmers and he's defended them over the years. And I'm thinking to myself, you really don't have any idea who you're talking to, do you?
Yeah, right. It's so bad. And they really strong arm people to make donations and stuff. Like it's really, really gross. Like I just
we're seeing, this kind of all dovetails. And honestly, I think the situation you're dealing with in Altadena kind of dovetails back into one of the prior times you and I talked about equity theft and land grabs.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh,
they are resetting.
Yeah.
All of the value of all of the equity for all of your neighbors right now.
God, it's really bums me out because I mean, it's only just like hitting me. We bought this house 2 years ago. We put all of our money because it's almost it's almost impossible to buy a house here because it's so expensive. So we finally we had to move way out of the city, up in the mountains. We put all that, and I just can't even talk honestly with my husband about it because I'm just afraid he would just really freak out if I was like, yeah, we kind of lost everything and we still have this huge mortgage.
I grew up down there. And so I'm very familiar with what you guys are dealing with in terms of what that area is. And it's bad. I mean, in terms of I totally get the amount of equity that you've lost now, because if you put your house on the market tomorrow,
I know. I would not cover the mortgage.
You'd be screwed.
I can't. And that's why then all of a sudden you have to have job security.
If I know
I'm not sure you have.
as well as I think I do, you also have a lot of people there for whom that equity was built over a lifetime.
The difference is the people who lost their houses are getting a check for the rebuilding. So people who are lost their houses are just getting $1 million check out the gate and they still own their lot. You know what I mean? So I'm not getting that check. So it's way financially, if you're just going to do dollars and cents, the people who lost their houses really don't have, it sucks a lot. It's awful. But
yes, but
dollars and cents wise, they're getting set at the pre-level. And what I think they're doing is and tell me if you
they're going to erase that community because most of those people are going to move away.
I know.
They're going to sell those lots and move to Tennessee with that money.
I know they're already doing that. And then I know right on the corners, the intersections, and I live on a kind of a busy street, they're going to build like condos and affordable housing,
you're,
those kind
you're
of
going
shit.
to get
Probably
multiple.
affordable housing, which sucks because then they subsidize it and then they remove the subsidies and you have slums, which we already like on the street corner. We already had like that sketchy
You're going to get
liquor
that
store.
really awesome mixed use housing that they build super quick. That's like very generic and poorly built.
You know, Anthony, I'm just 2 weeks away from having hit absolutely rock bottom of complete and utter depression about this situation. I somehow so I'm pulling out of the ditch. So I can't overly focus on it.
And those neighborhoods are so beautiful. With all the
it was. And a lot of the trees are gone. But what I think, so I'm trying to figure out what happened. And people really want me to say laser beams from outer space, but I didn't see any. And I was here watching houses burn one after the other. And what I think happened is like two things. And I want I don't know if you have an opinion on this or what, but I think like when you hear about wildfires in New Jersey and North Carolina, really wet places. I grew up in, and you never, ever thought about fires. My father would tell me, like, don't worry about the trees. They're green. They're not going to burn. It's the houses that burn. Stay away from the houses. He used to really worry about fire. And I feel like they, for one way or another, they are making things drier. Like it could be the chemtrails or whatever's in that. You know, I think most of that is like pollution from these new, like really gross fuels and everything. Whatever, maybe it's that. Maybe it's the fact that they enforce drought conditions by telling you not to water anything, which is not valid. You could desalinate water if you had to. Totally not valid. But I think they're creating conditions for wildfires, or at least not doing remediation things, prevention things that they could otherwise be doing. So they're creating a lot of these fires, not necessarily in deciding which towns in order are going to burn down, but just knowing it'll be fine. We've assessed it. And then on the other, and then to level that up, there's this guy, Pedro Pizarro, who is the head of Edison International, a real UN sustainability guy, politician, world kind of guy. He sits on the board. Of course, BlackRock and Vanguard own the biggest insurer and the electric company. And I'm not saying that those guys are hands-on management wise, but they could be. And this guy says that he wants to redo the entire energy system in Southern California by 2045. And the second biggest reason he cites is to prevent wildfires. So it's my opinion that they want the fires. I'm going to say kind of let it happen on purpose, but also have policies. I don't think that they're using laser beams, but almost. And then they are going to come in and they're scraping it. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are scraping all the houses, which is a direct transfer from the insurance companies who are supposed to be doing that to the taxpayer. It's outrageous what's happening there. And boy, the business that they're generating, it's shocking.
As someone who grew up in Southern California, I can tell you some of what I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I'll tell you what it's not. It's not drought. Because
we talked about that.
Right. If you look at the records, just the simple data, rainfall patterns in California have not changed in 150 years. The cycle of flood and drought that has been the cycle forever in California is the same. The rainfall patterns have not changed. They're doing a worse job of moving water around the state. Like the whole reason for the state water project was to get water from Northern California, where it floods all the time, to Southern California, where there's not enough water. And they're not doing that as well as they used to, or as much as they used to. You're absolutely correct about the conservation policies preventing things from being watered that would make them more green. But there's other stuff you can look at. When I was a kid in Southern California, so I was born in 71. So I grew up in Southern California in the 70s and 80s. There was ice plant everywhere. They planted ice plant on hillsides all over the place. And they did it for that reason, for fire retardant. Because all that wild grass that grows there burns like kindling.
Yeah.
Ice plant doesn't burn. Well, now go Google it. There are massive amounts of money being spent to tear out ice plant all over California because it's an invasive weed.
Yeah, but we like that.
It's an invasive weed, but it's an invasive weed that keeps the hills from burning. Like when I was a kid, they talked about this openly. We all talked about how it was a plant that didn't occur there naturally, and they told us, yes, it's been planted here because it doesn't burn.
And it's pretty, right?
Yeah, but it's green and has purple flowers.
Yeah, it's got flowers, and they're like straw kind of flowers.
Yeah, like a straw kind of
they're
flower.
They're really beautiful. They're super bright.
The leaves are like cactuses. They're like full of water. And
wow, I love those things.
It spreads like crazy, and it used to be everywhere, all over Southern California, Northern California. It was everywhere. And I mean,
Wow.
we used to play in it when I was a kid.
It's so beautiful. It doesn't even look real. It's so bright. I cannot believe that is,
But yeah, that was all planted. It was
is
planted
like
for
a utilitarian thing. That's cool.
They planted it for two reasons. One was it to stabilize sandy soils in
Yeah.
places where like they were getting blowing dunes. Up in Monterey and stuff, they had a lot of problems with sand dunes blowing all over the place. So they used it to stabilize the soil. And they also planted it. Like I said, they told us openly when I was a kid that they planted it to prevent fires. I mean, so I grew up in Palos Verdes. You know where that is, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of hills, a lot of brushland, like a lot of dry brush out there. And they would point to that to us and say, yeah, those hills can burn. So we plant ice plant. There was ice plant everywhere.
Wow.
But they've been tearing it out for years.
How nice it was to live on the beach, huh?
Yeah, it was all right. When I was a kid, I used to work for the city on the road crew in the summertime. And one of the things they would do is send us out with weed eaters to cut down brush on the hillsides.
I mean, this is something that I was really, really investigating this, of course, because it's like the thing that happened in my backyard, literally. That they first of all didn't have Altadena on the list of high fire risk places, which is insane. The Santa Ana winds come whoosh, right.
Oh yeah, and those hills are dry as a bone.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's not believable. Like it cannot have been good faith. And then another thing is when you look at the Edison, they had a very specific, they were supposed to clear the brush. They were behind schedule on clearing the brush at the bottom of the actual towers that went up. And then furthermore, they know that when you turn off the residential power, it creates surges in those high power lines. And they were putting something to divert that in place that was supposed to come online in June. And right before it comes online, they turn off all this residential power, which I guess they had to do because it was 100 miles an hour. But that surge was inevitable. They're trying to get out of it. But that's anyway. So I haven't done a show, like a solo show in a while. And I try to just keep people updated on what I'm discovering, because I have gotten a lot of questions of like, how's it going and what's happening? So this is what I'm coming up with. But I want to make sure before we part company, what else, like I want to make sure you shared everything that you can or interested in sharing about what you're working on, what you think people should be aware of, anything.
I mean, I guess the main things I've talked about, the main things I'm working on. I mean, the highest profile thing I'm working on is this situation in Point Reyes, which,
yeah,
I think
that's a big deal.
It's going to be fine for the farmers because our deal was signed and done, so everything is binding. So I think a lot of this is about making people uncomfortable, and I think it'll blow over. The reality is that I think it's a fair arrangement. I would rather have a world in which family farms could thrive, but
yeah,
that option wasn't there. I guess other than that, I'm just fighting with bureaucrats for different folks. And
I thought you were retiring, Anthony.
Well, I was never. My plan was never really to retire, and then things kind of changed because I'd sold my law firm and I was working for those guys on like a consulting basis after I sold the firm. And then about a year into that, they merged into a very large national like corporate law firm, which wasn't of interest to me. And
the opposite of what you would ever have.
I don't think that's really any place for me in that world.
Yeah.
So I ended up kind of adrift. So I've been practicing as a solo practitioner since then, doing projects like this and a few other things for clients that know me. I've been representing some small ranchers and individuals here in Oregon. So I've been doing work I'm licensed in Oregon, Washington, California. I've been doing work in all three states and seem to be getting pretty good results. So I'm kind of now just trying to figure out what's next for me.
Well, what about your acres of freedom?
Well, I'm here.
Are you Were you not what were you leasing your land, letting people graze on your
Yeah,
land, that kind of thing?
the arrangement I have here is I live on a ranch on the southern Oregon coast, and there's a local farmer and beef producer here who has a kind of a loose family connection to us through my wife's family, and he rents from us. So he puts cows here in the spring and summer. Our property floods. If you want to see pictures of our century flood that we just had, I put a lot of pictures on my Instagram, which is public.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Yeah.
and we had a century flood here, the third highest flood that's been recorded since 1901. So it got all the way up to our house, which has never happened that we're aware of.
Yeah.
And we were basically, you couldn't get in or out of here. Like the road was covered in water. And we were just kind of stuck here. But that's all.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we went through quite a flood up here.
Wow.
So that's all receded now, and the cows are here for the spring. So it's actually very nice because we get cow calf pairs here in the spring. He brings the babies here.
Oh, cool.
We have because of all that flooding, we have wonderful grass here, and we have a big pond in our front pasture, so they have plenty of water to drink, and we have river access on our back pasture, so they have fresh water there. So right now we have a bunch of cows and calves here. There's one bull out there, and we'll get beef in the fall. And we're just, I'm operating out.
Are you getting liver?
I do. I have liver. I'll be getting more liver. If you enjoyed it, I can bring you more.
Oh my gosh, did I enjoy it? I ate it for breakfast. It was gone in like one day. You actually can OD on liver, so I shouldn't do that. I like worry that I'm gonna like sometimes my heart races, like I'll just eat so much of it.
It's really good. It's really good.
But so if you come down to my area, you can do a little disaster tourism. People are loving driving by my house, and it's really crazy. By the time they get to my house, they're like, it's just like it's like the pictures do not do it justice. So you'll come. My husband loves to smoke barbecue Texas style, but he feels like it's in bad taste at the moment. But we can make you some ribs or something. Come on down. We'll trade you a home cooked meal for a liver.
My wife and I are coming down to see our son perform in about 2 weeks. So maybe we'll be able to catch up and get the disaster tour and see Altadena.
That would be great. I would love that. Absolutely. I hope I'm here. I'm going to Jazz Fest in New Orleans. That's my one thing. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to rain every day, but I don't care. I just want to get out of here, man. It's bad for your freaking psyche.
Yeah, being around that destruction it's not good for you.
It's not good. They're scraping it like we're at the bottom of where the fires were. So I guess they're scraping at bottom. So they're actually scraping it everywhere. I mean, there's so many, and that's looking a little better. But anyway, all right, you do your thing. Thank you so much, Anthony. It is always an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I love that we disagree on stuff. You wouldn't believe how rarely it really happens when you have somebody on.
When you sent me the email, I'm like, oh boy, Monica's not going to like what I have to say on this.
Homework. Yeah. Well, plus I only felt bad because I gave you homework. I sent him a bunch of links of all these things. Like I've been looking, I have to really do a deep dive on this stuff. But I'm surprised that that you didn't call bullshit on. I totally understand and respect like your understanding of the process and everything. I defer completely. The motivation, what's really going on. I mean, I have my opinions and you have yours, but it's super fun to hash it out a little bit. Anyway,
yeah, I'll get worked up over these big firm lawyers getting targeted when people get worked up over the little guys that get targeted.
Yeah,
it happens to us. It happens to us.
I don't think they're really being targeted. I think they're playing a game. Yeah,
they're not really being targeted, but like that lady that got
yes
for tweets, she got targeted.
I know the January 6th people. It's bullshit.
January 6th people. I mean, look, I don't like Rudy Giuliani. Okay, I'm not a Rudy Giuliani fan. I'm not some dyed-in-the-wool Republican. But
he killed a lot of people.
Yeah, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. However, what they did to him is just like what they did to Alex Jones. It's not right to wipe people's whole lives out because they say something you don't like.
Yeah. I have very little sympathy for him for like a lot of reasons. But yes, I agree. No, I call them sacrificial wolves. They take people like Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, and they're like, we're going to rape you, and everyone's going to cheer. And then, when first they came for the assholes.
I'm a little bit different from a lot of lawyers, and I don't really socialize with very many lawyers, and I guess I don't get along very well with many lawyers. They're just not my kind of people for the most part. And I'm sure that if I met this guy, Eastman, who they're taking his license away for filing one of the election cases, I'm sure I wouldn't like the guy if I met him. Probably wouldn't. He probably wouldn't like me.
Right.
But it bothers me when they take away a lawyer's license for filing a case, even if it's a bad case. Like, I mean, I don't care. Like, file the case, litigate it, you lose, fine. But now you're going to go after his license for it because he challenged your precious democracy. Shut up. Like,
Right.
If we're not going to care about that, I'm certainly not going to care about Skadden and Arps forced to do some theatrical fake kissing of the ring so that they can continue to be on the inner circle of the money faucet.
I'm with you. No,
There's
I
not
don't have a lot of.
lost a thing in all of this.
Say that
None of
again.
those firms lost a thing, you know.
Yeah,
People
no,
like
I
me
agree with
or
that.
the lady with the tweets had to pay out of their own pocket for defense.
Yeah.
And deal with consequences I don't know how much money being prosecuted cost me. I mean,
There was a great
I lost
blogger.
professional connections over that.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who got wiped out when Alex Jones got wiped out. Of course, he benefited, but nobody else did. Okay, so we got to go. We're turning into pumpkins right now,
Very good.
and so please let me know when you're in town, and also anytime you feel like getting something off your chest, you have an open invitation, of course.
Thank you.
And if you think we disagree, I encourage you to bring that even faster.
That's one of the things I like about you is you don't mind a little bit of healthy disagreement.
I love it. All right. Thank you, everyone. I absolutely got to go, Anthony. But you do have to hang on for just a second. Bye, everybody.